He said, by the way, we have this civilian pilot training program. And so my brother, oh, that's eager. He could spend the summer doing that. Anyway, so I was working in Chicopee, Massachusetts, which is the home of Westover Army Air Force Base. And so I had a car, so he called me up. We were both 12 miles away. And so he asked me to take him to Westfield, Massachusetts to get his physical. So I drove him over to Westfield. While he was taking his physical, I looked around, the doctor's credentials, and I noticed that he'd gone to a school that I had. And so I mentioned to him that I tried for the Navy pilot program a couple of years previously when I was a junior. Anyway, I flunked my eye exam at that stage. Anyway, he said, well, okay, come on in, I'll give you an eye exam. And he said, you've got 20/15 vision. You can pass any eye exam. So I took my brother to the airport for the manager. He passed his physical. And so when I spoke to the manager, I said, how about my getting in with this class? He says, well, we got a bunch of guys ahead of you, but I'll give you an application. So I completed the application. And a week later, I got a call from the manager. He says, if you get the physical, we'll put you in the same class as your brother. So my brother and I both went through the CPT program together. And we both graduated and we finished. And when I got through, I contacted the Navy people about getting a reevaluation exam. They weren't interested. They sloughed me off. So I talked to the Army people, and they were interested. So I had a physical with a reserve unit or National Guard unit at Logan Airport. And so I went there, passed it, and this was in September. And they passed the physical, and so I got on the list to be a cadet, flying cadet, Army flying cadet. And so in December, I enlisted, December 28th, enlisted in the program, sent to Albany, Georgia, which was a contract school. And so went through the program. There were 5 of us that left Springfield, Massachusetts, and 3 of us graduated and 2 flunked out, which was the normal attrition rate, about 40%. And so after I finished, I was sent to become an instructor. And so I worked I got my training as an instructor, and in September of 1941, I was assigned to Cochrane Field as a basic flying instructor. We were teaching British cadets. And so before the war was declared, I happened to be in the hospital. And the nurse that was in charge of my ward unit happened to be my prospective wife. She said, oh, my first name, by the way, I discovered 3 days before I was to get my commission that my first name was not Stanley, it was Stanislaw, Stanislaw, which is a Polish name. And there's a bit of history beyond that. During the days of the royalty, the first male born of Polish ancestry was dedicated to the service. Stan is state, Sla is glory. So state's glory. And that's the way it was. That was the historical background of that. Anyway, when she looked at my name, she said, oh, I got to see this character. I was a succulent. And so we became friends. We had parties. I was invited to the nurses' Christmas party. All the eligible bachelors who were invited. They were patients. Anyway, so we went. Well, we finally got along, and we dated and so forth. And then I got orders for B-17 school after a year, in August of 42, for a week. So I went home for a week and came back, and the orders were revoked. Well, I was so pissed off that I had jobs. I was a flying instructor, a ground school instructor, a squadron statistical officer, and an engineering officer. So I was, I thought I'd get relieved some of these duties. I was working 7 days a week. Anyway, I got pissed off, and the nurses' quarters were right across the street from the academic ground school. And so I went over to see Virginia, and I told her I just lost a promotion probably. Anyway, I went the director of flying training, who eventually became a good friend of ours later on, called me and he said, "Stan, you just did bad thing." And I said, I blew my stack. Yeah, I told him I wasn't going to do it. Anyway, so, well, one of the problems was when I was originally assigned to be a ground school instructor, I was told it was going to be for 6 months. And here was a year, and still no relief. So that's why I blew up. Anyway, I went to see Virginia, and we talked, anyway. But so when the director of flying training called me in, and he told me, "Stan, you're going to be the first guy to go on combat crew training." I said, "Oh, great." But then I went to B-24s at Smyrna, and we completed our training in late December. That was in mid-October, and we completed our training in late December. And we went to Salt Lake City for processing, and then I went from there to B-24 Davis-Monthan Field. And we spent training from Davis-Monthan, Alamogordo, Roswell, New Mexico. And then at the end of our training, B-24 training, I was one of the 13 pilots that was sent to B-17s for modification, all of it. And so at Topeka, Kansas. Anyway, when we got back, only the pilot, co-pilot, and the crew chief we transitioned, flew three landings, and we went to Topeka, came back, and so when we came back, we were ordered shipped into England, and I thought, oh boy, B-17s, Anyway, but we flew over. We landed at Goose Bay, Labrador, and then I lost an engine of B-17 in the soup flying to Iceland. So we landed at Iceland. I lost it, and so we spent a week there, got the engine replaced. We flew to Prestwick, and then we flew down to an area near Blackpool where they took the B-17 away from me. And so that was then I got orders to go to 389th, B-24. And so that's where I settled, and I was a replacement. Since I was the senior replacement crew, I got this old clunker of a B-24D that had been crash landed. And it was a very early model B-24. I can't recall what bomb group, but I think it's in here. Anyway, and so I was assigned that airplane. It had no Tokyo tanks. It had thin-bladed props, not the what we call the broad props. Anyway, so but it could fly just like I could fly just like a T-6. I could pull the thing back and glide in. Anyway, so I got that airplane, and they installed two Bombay tanks. So we only had half of a Bombay for bombs. But anyway, so as soon as we, let's see, in I think it was late June, we got orders to go to Africa, the 3 bomb groups from England. And so we went to Africa, and we landed in Oran our first time, and then we went to a place south of Benghazi, 15 miles south of Benghazi. They used a road grader to fix our landing strip. They were doing that as we were landing. Anyway, but they built it crosswind so that the sand would be blown off the runway as we took off. Anyway, we flew the Ploesti mission on August the 1st of 1943 on a Sunday. We were grounded. I mean, nobody was able to leave the base a week before that Sunday, on that starting to be in July. And so they had put out out in the desert, they'd had a mock outline of the buildings, of the so-called cracking plants and stuff. and they had we had to bomb at 200 feet, skip bomb, because we had to simulate 200 feet, because that was the 5 refineries that we were in had 175-foot chimneys, each of them, and so I was on that mission, didn't have a single bullet hole, and we, I saw people next to me getting shot up, with machine gun fire. But we escorted a bunch of airplanes to Greece and Turkey, and we finally landed in Nicosia, Cyprus, just before Killer Kane did. And he got the Congressional Medal of Honor. He was a group commander, one of the group commanders, 376. And, one of our guys got the Congressional Medal of Honor posthumously, because his plane was got on fire, and he crash landed right into the target, I think it was, just before he got there. So he got the Congressional Medal of Honor. There were Leon Johnson, Major Jerstad, Killer Kane, and I can't remember the others, but anyway, there were 5 of them that got the Congressional Medal of Honor. We all got DFCs. And I was a week getting back. We landed at Nicosia, Cyprus. They had to load our plane from 5-gallon gas cans, which was a real chore. And we went to the mainland. We landed at Lydda airfield, which is just out in what is now Palestine, or Israel. And we spent a week there, about 4 or 5 days, and we got some money. It was our first. When we landed in Nicosia, Cyprus, I told our crew that we could take out some of the escape kits that we had. We had escape kits just in case. So we had some money. And so we had to borrow money from each of the officers could borrow $100. So with the 10 crew members, we apportioned it $40 to each, and and then when we, funny thing, when we got back out of Nicosia, Cyprus, some of the guys had spent some money for some wine. And so I told the guys, I said, listen, you can only double your money. Otherwise you're gonna, I don't want to have them people gouged. So we flew back to the base, and on our trip from Nicosia, Cyprus to Lydda airfield, it was on the island. There was one of the people from the American embassy that was stationed in Cairo, Egypt. So he asked if he could fly with me to Lydda airport, and so because he could then get another ride to Egypt and Cairo. So I said okay, and so we took him over. I didn't have a parachute then, but it was an easy flight, short. And so we got refueled, and then we flew back. When we flew across westward from, we flew over the mainland, across Egypt. When we reached the canal, Nile Canal, why, all of a sudden there's Spitfires on my wing, and well, if I'd opened my bomb bay door, well, I didn't have any bombs anyway, but anyway, they were escorting us, helped us out. So as soon as they peeled off, we landed at Benghazi, and that was it. We flew 12 hours and 50 minutes, almost 13 hours.
So did you know you didn't have enough fuel to get back?
That's correct, that's why we landed in Nicosia, Cyprus. We made a 360-degree turn. See, the 5 bomb groups they broke around. They each had a specific, the 5 highest production refineries. And then we had Campina, which was about 10 miles or 15 miles outside of Ploesti, but it was one of the major refineries. And so when we went down there, we had a specific path that we had to go around the mountains and stuff like this. So our group commander goofed. He was supposed to, he said, "Oh no, we were supposed to make a turn." He made the wrong turn, and so we had to make a 360 in front of the target and come back in and bomb. And so that's when we got busted up quite a bit.
Because they were more ready for you.
Oh, correct. Yeah, they knew we were going to be. Anyway, they were well alerted anyway, because Ploesti was a real sensitive target. And that was August. In September, we got orders to go back to England. And we went back to England. And the reason I wanted to tell you is that when I got orders to go, my squadron commander decided to fly as my co-pilot. And I was thinking, I had heard, I aborted on the Wiener Neustadt mission, which was way up the Adriatic near Austria. I aborted we flew for about 7 hours in the Adriatic. We got fired on by a destroyer. We were flying, along the coast of Italy. Hit the heel and then the toe, and I landed in Malta because I had lost an engine. And so we spent a week in Malta, and then we came back home to Benghazi. But on the mission to Malta, our nearest landing area was Tunis. And my wife knew that I was in B-24. My wife-to-be knew that I was in B-24s. So she went out and she met the guy that was my operations officer, who was OS Point. Anyway, she talked to him and she found out that I was in that bomb group. And so we knew that's how we had the connection. So when I heard that the operations officer told me, I said, "Oh, I'm going to abort and land in Tunis on our way back." Well, my squadron commander flew with me, and I couldn't do that. So we landed, and we finally got back to England. And we flew 2 weeks, we flew some no-ball missions. The V-1 rockets off the coast of France. Flew some there, and then we were ordered back to Africa again. And so where did we land? We landed in Tunis, just with the 2nd Bomb Group. And that's when I contacted my wife-to-be. And we had lunch together in the old a restaurant called the Log Cabin in Tunis. And while we were there, I took my officers with me, and we all had lunch with her. And when we were sitting there talking, I heard somebody talking in English in another booth. And I stood up, and this other guy happened to be a fellow that I played soccer with at Mass State. And he was an entomologist, and he was a bug man. And so he was there on the mosquito control and all that kind of it. Anyway, so that's the only time we had that. So after 2 weeks later, I was back in England again. And so we ran some missions. And after our 20th mission, we got a leave of absence. We took a week off. And we went to Scotland, the 4 officers. And we had a nice time there. Lovely. And then we got back, and after you had 20, you could pick your missions to fly. Well, on January the 28th, we all went into Hethel, and we went to a dance there. Did you ever get to Hethel? No. Anyway, they had a dance hall there called Samson's. We called it the Muscle Palace. Anyway, but Gilbert Siegel, who was my navigator, who had flown with me every mission, he decided to stay at a hostel in town. When we got back to the base, the PA system said, "all out effort," And so I polled the crew, and I said, "You're willing to go?" The officers, they said, "Yeah, we'll go." It's supposed to be, after the briefing, we found out it's supposed to be a milk run. And so we had contacted the hostel that Gilbert was in, but they said, "No, he's not here," I think they just didn't bother checking anyway. So we flew with a replacement navigator. And we flew, and it was supposed to be a milk run, and Hell, I flew in the diamond position right under the group lead. And this damn ME 119 or 109, I can't remember which, but it's in. Anyway, came through right through the middle of the formation. And he knocked out our number 2 engine, and it was on fire. Crew chief was right in the top turret. He could see everything. And we pulled the, CO2 on that engine. Nothing, it couldn't put it out. So we knew we were in trouble. So I had put the airplane on autopilot because I had it always trimmed for that. And we rang the bell. And so we all bailed out. I was the last to go, and everybody got out. And I landed in the middle of a plowed field in Germany. It was, January. Anyway, I always kept the candy bar in my flying suit, cigarettes. And I was lighting up the cigarette after my candy bar, and I looked around. They had these little shacks in these plowed areas for rain protection, stuff like that. Anyway, I look around, and there are all these farmers around there with pitchforks. And so they, yelled for me, and they called me out. And so I came out. I think I had my parachute. I dragged my parachute in there too. But anyway, so I was taken in, and this is an unusual part of the story that I got subsequent. The airplane blew up after we evacuated, and we found out later from our crews that were from the 389th Bomb Group. Anyway, but I landed, and I was picked up by a tractor and taken into this little village called Einheim, which had a small village. It was a school, city hall, town hall, jail, community center, all that. It was all in one building. And I was put in a cell, and then an Air Force officer came in and picked me up and took me to WWII, which was just outside of Frankfurt. And I spent my first night in the railway station that we were supposed to bomb. Anyway, I was concerned because we would bomb in the daylight, and the British would bomb at night. And I knew if they came over at night, we'd have a real problem. Anyway, but they didn't. It was fogged in. So I spent the night, then I was transferred to WWII, which is the interrogation center. I spent either 2 or 3 nights there in solitary, then taken to Stalag Luft I, which was a former British, it was a former World War I POW camp. They had 5 barracks, and for air officers strictly. And so spent the night, and we got put in. I was assigned to Barracks 10 in the original compound. By the time we got through, there were additions, North 1, North 2, and North 3. We had a complement of 8,000 officer POWs total. We had some British initially, but later on the Americans took control. And we were the only camp that was not moved because we were directly north of Berlin. And we were liberated by the Russians on May the 8th. And so we were flown over to Camp Lucky Strike. Oh, by the way, from the period from Thanksgiving until Easter, we only had subsistence on German rations, which was a piece of bread about 2 1/4 inches wide. That was a whole day ration for the day, and most of it was sawdust. And so, anyway, I lost 45 pounds in that period. Then when we got Red Cross parcels again, there were only 1 parcel instead of per man. There was 1 parcel for 2 men. So we had a combine where we ate together in the barracks. I met my bombardier, navigator, and co-pilot. We were in the same barracks after our Stalag Luft I. And then I was a captain, so I got a sort of a little privilege because I was an older Kriegi and so forth. And so when they opened up North 2, Brackendorf and I, my bombardier, we moved to North 2, and I got a separate room, one of the two end rooms. The two end rooms were for just 2 bunk beds. So it was so, so Brackendorf and I were in one room, and the barracks commander and his navigator were in another room. And so, but by the time we got through, we had both of another bunk bed, 2 beds. All we had was a little aisle, just about 15, 16, 18 inches to get, around. But we had a stove in our room. But we had a combine. There were 8 of us that had, we were initially 4, and we grew to 8, because they even had people living in the halls in our barracks. Just, it was a pretty horrible situation.
What did you do to pass the time?
Oh, I played soccer, played poker. We had a good library when I was in the original compound. That was the center, really. We had a baseball field, and I played soccer with the British, and read a lot of books. We had a good library, and we got information through Red Cross sources about conditions. One of our radio guys built a crystal set, and so we had radio reception, and we hid the thing in the barracks. There were prefab barracks, and they had panels, wall panels, and so what they did is we would keep the radios, disassemble the radio, and if there were a raid going on, they wouldn't search us, but we'd go out and have to spend sometimes all day out there. And later on we got so sophisticated that we could disassemble the radio and put it down in between the panels. Cut off a panel and stick it down with a string and reassemble it. But we'd get information. The Germans had a PA system, through the barracks. But it was, they didn't tell us much about how the war was going. But that was it. And that was our stay in POW camp. Anyway, came back. I was put in the hospital as soon as I got to Camp Lucky Strike. A week later, I was on board a ship bound for home, and got home in June, and spent 60 or 90. Can't remember exactly, but I had a bunch of leave, and then I had it extended, and so then I went to Atlantic City, and was processed through. Met a friend of mine there, and I was assigned to Smyrna Army Air Force Base, where at the end of the war, after the war, B-24 base, where I trained. And so my wife-to-be, she was in Africa, Tunis. She went to Corsica, Sardinia, the other way, Sardinia, Corsica, and then to Italy. And she was ready to go to be deployed to the Orient. But fortunately, the war ended, just about that time, and so she was sent home. So she got home, I think in September.